The goal right now should be to create a human, you, that is going to be an animal in a decade or in 2 decades. That's who you want to be. Did the first interview, screen tested, was having the most comprehensive STI check in history, and then before I knew it, I was on the island. Like, that was literally it.
It's not really a case of like trying to win Danielle over, because I'm not prepared to fake my affection.
Fear inside of me, oh shit, like I shouldn't be that person. I'm supposed to be, yeah, mate, birds and booze and booking and da-da-da-da-da. But at the time, I was just being the person I thought I was. It just turned out that wasn't who I was.
Yeah.
So,
what did you learn from that experience, Chris? What did you actually take away and think, you know, I'd have a bit more of that, or actually, that's not for me? Yeah.
Deep down, you're aware that they don't actually love you. They love the character that you're playing. The number one rule in business is to just keep playing the game. You don't want to go broke and you don't want to go to jail. Those are the two things that you don't want to have happen. I woke up on Tenerife's, the central reservation of Tenerife's largest motorway. I got taken home by the Guardia Civil, the Spanish military police.
So, we are joined today with Chris Williamson. Now, for those who don't know Chris is the founder and the host of Modern Wisdom podcast. He's also been a founder of businesses and franchises in the UK in the nightlife scene. I believe he picked up his first franchise when he was 19-year-old. Bit of a fun fact as well, he was the first ever contestant in Love Island, the first ever guy to walk through them doors. So I'm sure we'll touch on all those things. But anyway, Chris, how are you doing?
Very well, mate. Thank you. Yeah, you've definitely done your research.
How did this journey start then, Chris? Because I always like to try and take it back when we guess. And 19-year-old getting your first franchise, that's not something that every 19-year-old does. And I know there's a lot of youngsters sort of in the nightlife scene, in the club promotion scene and things like that. How do you go from sort of getting that as I'm assuming it was a part-time job to actually getting a franchise?
Yeah, so I arrived at university originally from Middlesbrough, came to Newcastle, sat down after Freshers Week next to this guy and said, I'm skint. I've spent all my money boozing and partying during Freshers Week. And that guy that I sat down next to turned out to be my business partner of 14 years, who I've still not got rid of. We're in our 15th Freshers just gone now, and we've been together ever since. So, yeah, that was just fortune. He'd worked for a company called Absolute Life in Leeds. That then turned into Voodoo Events in Leeds. Then long time down the line, we ended up working with the directors from that. But back in the day, Carnage was a bar crawl, a t-shirt bar crawl that many of your listeners may be familiar with. You wore t-shirts and ticked off tasks and stuff like that and got quite drunk. And that was a time when running Carnage was like a license to print money. It was just dominating every city, 3,000, 4,000 students a time. And they weren't in Newcastle. The guys who we had started flyering for from Leeds had the Leeds franchise. They wanted to expand to Newcastle. They knew us. They put us on a split. And the same deal that we wrote on the back of a coaster in Spy Bar on Osborne Road in Jesmond is the same deal a decade and a half later that we're still operating off. We've got no shareholder agreements. We've got nothing else. Just a gentleman's agreement. I've been groomsman at Darren's wedding. We were all there at Matt, one of the other directors' weddings. We've been away on 10 plus holidays together. And yeah, that was it. It was right place, right time. Sadly, there's not a formula that anyone can copy for that because it was first mover advantage. That was a big part of it. It was the first big t-shirt bar crawl, and a few other sort of bits of serendipity came together. But I think it's the rock that says, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And very much at that time, we were constantly looking for things. We had the networks, we had the access, we had the work, we had the work rate and the motivation. And then from there, it just was very, very sort of standard progression. We picked up more gigs, we raised our profile, and now we're one of the biggest events companies in the north of England.
What's happening, guys? I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you are, please hit that like, hit the subscribe button, and press the notification bell so you don't miss another episode. Absolutely phenomenal story, that, Chris. I mean, when you got that job, when you were strapped for cash and you just need to do it for the money, were you that type of guy anyway? Because people who, there's a bit of a stereotype around that side of promoter and stuff like that. I mean, certainly, again, judgmental as it may sound, you don't seem like that type of guy now. Obviously, you've matured, you've grown up in the kind of when you were 19, strapped for cash and doing anything to tick a few boxes on t-shirts and stuff. When you went into that industry, were you confident from the off, or did you actually just need the money?
So I mean, I was a flyer. I didn't have any grand plans. I didn't think, I'm going to make this a job. I'd never had a job. Like, my only job was as a room service boy at Tall Trees in Yarm, delivering breakfasts to people that were hungover after going to Tall Trees. So I didn't really have any expectations. I was looking for an identity, although I didn't know it. I was looking for an identity at university, and very quickly I wrapped that around being a party boy. Got myself into partying, running parties, being known around town. I had like a big afro, which visually was quite striking, so people recognized me and remembered me. Again, that wasn't the plan. This all sounds like a beautiful, well-structured, formulated strategy. Looking back on it, at the time, it just happened to be a bunch of things that occurred, and then I took advantage of them. But no, I didn't have any preconceptions about what I was going to do. I just did the graft, had a bit of talent for it, and a great business partner who I got on incredibly well with, and we really gelled. His weaknesses were my strengths, and my weaknesses were his strengths, and it just permitted us to move very, very fast.
So how old were you at the time when you kind of pivoted and got involved with the Love Island scene and all that type of stuff? And was that to actually enhance your career at the time on the doors and promoting them nights?
I would say so, yeah. So I did Take Me Out when I was 24 or 25, and then I did Love Island when I was 27. Right. And again, with that, like, it's now my life tends to have a little bit more structure to it. I understand the benefit of having a grander plan and a longer term vision. But as with many young people, if you've only been on the planet 22 years, 1 year is like a significant portion of your life. It's like 5% of your life. So planning ahead is actually really tough. I just did stuff. I'm very curious. I just wanted to have adventures and go and enjoy myself and see different things. I wanted to know what it was like to be on stage with Paddy McGuinness in front of 300 people. I wanted to know what it was like to go and live in a villa with no contact with friends and family for a month. These were interesting experiences to me, and my goal was just to chase them down. There was always going to be some associated clout with that, which is great. And the platform that it gives you is an assistance. But that was never my goal. I think a lot of people go on reality TV now not to provide a springboard to their career, but to become their career. They hope that they're going to find I'm going to be a charcoal toothpaste ambassador until I'm 70 or whatever it might be. Whereas the best guys and girls that go on there have something going on already. They have some qualities and some talents that they can then leverage this extra clout with, as opposed to it being famous for famous' sake.
So looking at wanting to know as a young lad, what it's like to get on stage with Paddy McGuinness and all that, how was it then? And what did you learn from that experience, Chris? What did you actually take away and think, I'd have a bit more of that, or actually, that's not for me?
From the Take Me Out one, I was still far too young and dumb to really reflect on it. I got taken home by the Guardia Civil, the Spanish military police in Tenerife. So I woke up on Tenerife's, the central reservation of Tenerife's largest motorway. This is when I was still partying hard. But that gives you a sense of kind of where my personality was at the time. So I didn't drink frequently, but when I did, I was very much a party drinker, like classic promo drinker, just showing off, big bottles on tables, etc., etc. Kind of, I guess everyone in the promo scene goes through it. And then the Love Island scenario, I was able to reflect on that a little bit more. So again, I'd been continuing this big name on campus thing, which again, a lot of guys and girls may be familiar with. They attach themselves to the earliest identity that they find, which for many people might be a businessman or a partier or a friend or a brother or a sister or a young dad or whatever it might be. For me, it was being a club promoter. I felt that I had to live up to this particular kind of meta character I'd created. Chris Williamson was this guy who would party and know everyone and blah, blah, blah. But really inside that wasn't me. That isn't me. I never kind of was that. I was able to do it and I was very competent at it, but it wasn't fulfilling me. It wasn't fully virtuous and aligned with who I was. And upon spending 4 weeks cooped up with people who were the person I thought I was dealt a fatal dose of contrast between them and me. Look, that's who is the person you're pretending to be, and this is you. And with nothing else to distract you, it's a very harsh lesson and a very obvious line, differential to see. So I came off and thought, that's interesting. Like, there's definitely something going on here. I'm not really too sure what's going on here, but I probably could do with investigating a little bit further, finding out whether or not this has any validity to it, whether or not I should continue going down this particular trajectory. Turned out that I shouldn't have done. So I didn't. I did a lot of internal work, reading, meditating, spending time sort of just thinking about myself and what I wanted and the values I had and the direction I wanted my life to go in. Started telling the truth a lot more, blah, 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 blah. And that led to me doing a bunch of different projects, traveling. I went to Thailand and Bali and, everywhere wanky where you can go and kind of find yourself. And
harem pants.
Yeah. No, I didn't go full on for that, but
no.
Yeah, it was a very interesting discovering time for me. Very much was treading new ground.
So when you said there was that harsh reality of that contrast when you were in there and that experience, and I think you've touched on a few of your other podcasts, Chris, when you mentioned you were chatting on to someone. I think you maybe came across a bit geeky, and they asked you
very much so talk
a little bit more and things like that.
Yes. Correct. Yeah. So on the first night, I sat down, I pointed at something, said the reason that the tree was like this, and as she said, "Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more." Or "That's like really clever. You're really clever. Tell me more." I got this kind of fear inside of me. Oh shit! Like I shouldn't be that person. I'm supposed to be yeah, mate, birds and booze and booking and da 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 da. Like that was who.
Yeah.
Yes. Correct.
And when you were in there, Chris, when you kind of learnt about obviously you learnt a lot about yourself and realised that wasn't necessarily who you were and things like that, but it was kind of playing a vital role in kind of what you were doing at the time. Did you learn much about other people and maybe the people who were in that environment with you?
I've always had a big interest in human nature, and that meant that you don't have a phone or TV or books or mates or anything else to distract you. You spend a lot of time people watching. So I did. And I learned some interesting insights about how everybody operates, I think.
Because I wonder how many people would have also kind of had a similar mindset to yourself. And once they were in that scenario, thought, you know what, actually, this isn't maybe who I actually am. I just thought if because you've been immersed in that world, whether you realise that's actually more common than what people would think.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I don't know. I don't think many people go on reality TV and get catapulted towards a life of virtue. Like, it's certainly a non-typical outcome. When you say, what did you get from going on Love Island? Most people say, I got like a blue tick and I got to bang a bunch of birds in nightclubs and I got to do this, this and this. They don't say, I went on an interesting journey of introspection and actually found out a lot about myself. Like, that's not what most people go on for, and also not what most people do. But in that way, like I sort of didn't find love, but very much was put on a journey where I got to find myself. Brilliant. Which was a very good use of my time.
And what was your support network around you then, Chris? And what were people saying when you were, applying for these shows initially, or whether you had an agent who was looking after you at the time or whatever, but when you were going through those processes, were people saying, Chris, what are you doing? Or were they actually saying, yeah, that's the type of lad we think he is anyway, he'll smash this scenario?
Yeah, I'd built up a very robust caricature of myself. I don't think anyone really had much of an insight. Certainly not that I was diverging as far as I was from the person that I truly was. And even I didn't, again, I can post hoc rationalize all of this and say, well, obviously what I'd done was I'd lived up to this expectation of what I thought people wanted, and then I'd got reward from the market, and I'd got reward in terms of clout and status, and that had further entrenched, blah, 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 blah. But at the time, I was just being the person I thought I was. It just turned out that wasn't who I was. Yeah. So there wasn't a massive support network in terms of that. I've got a huge company, with like 12 managers that work for us, and then 400 staff below that, and a couple of thousand customers that'll say hello to me on the street, and a business partner who's known me for 14 years and all this sort of stuff. But very much I'm the sort of person who gets left to his own devices, kind of do my own thing. Mum and dad don't tend to really, they want to support me and they want me to be happy, but they don't stick their oar in with regards to what it is that I'm going to do. So I just cracked on. The same casting producer that looks after Take Me Out also looks after Love Island, which means it literally felt like I did the first interview. He asked me up for a coffee, did the first interview, screen tested. was having the most comprehensive STI check in history, and then before I knew it, I was on the island. Like, that was literally it. It just felt like I'd sort of tumbled through it all. So very different now. More people applied to go on Love Island 2019 than applied to Oxford and Cambridge universities combined. So it's a very, very different process now.
So obviously that, and kind of when you were saying about when you were in your early 20s, 24, and you had the big afro and you were going on Take Me Out and all these type of things, I imagine that's kind of, it's part of your personal brand, Chris. And obviously with the carnage and all the success you've had with the promotions game, how important do you think personal brand actually is? Especially now, obviously you've came off the back of shows as well, not giving any credit to where you're at now because of the shows, of course. And obviously you are successful in your own right, but how important is personal branding now with success?
Well, I mean, everybody is a personal brand. Everyone has an Instagram or a Facebook or a Twitter. So whether you like it or not, that is essentially a marketing communication channel. Even if it's just for you as a wife and a mother of two, like, that is your marketing communication channel. Even if all your marketing is your own personality, it's still that. A lot of the time now, people spend they very much consider what it is that they're going to wear, the sort of events they're going to attend, because they realize in a world where our lives are increasingly transparent and seen by other people, that the clothes that you wear and the places that you go and the people that you're with are a comment on the sort of person you are. I see that you wear an Under Armour top. Therefore, I can infer some things about you based on the fact that I know what Under Armour is as a brand. And that also influences my view of Under Armour as a brand. Okay, so I can map onto the Under Armour world that there's another person who wears the Under Armour brand and so on and so forth. So I think personal branding is very important, but I also believe that people need to be very careful about how they view personal branding, because it very quickly can turn into what I was doing, which was living a caricature. I wasn't living true to the person that I was. I was just the brand. There was no Christopher anymore. There was just ego and sort of this superfluous proxy for the person that I was.
So how do you break away from that mindset then? Because you've been immersed in that, and you totally understand, whether it's, I imagine when you were sort of ego driven and that was at the forefront of everything that was happening in your life at that time, Chris, when you walked into a shop to purchase a Nike t-shirt or an Under Armour t-shirt, maybe you did that for other reasons than why you would make that decision now. How did you manage to break away from that kind of mindset? Because that's got to be, when you're living in that every day, you're almost playing this caricature. How do you actually break free from that? Because surely at a point, you're going to be convincing yourself that is who you are.
Very much so, man. Yeah, that's the crux of the problem. Mm-hmm. You can become such an effective liar that you don't even know that you're lying anymore. And you can compromise telling your own truth to the point where you don't know what your truth is. And that's a very dangerous situation to be in. And it's scary, man. And there's a lot more people, I think, that are in that situation than even know it, because their self-deception is so comprehensive and so successful that they don't know that there's something beneath it. I had Aubrey Marcus on my podcast, and he gave this really beautiful line where he said, the ego is incapable of receiving love. It can only receive praise. That's a really interesting insight. The fact that when you are playing a character, promoter Chris or whatever Chris, like playing these different roles, party boy Chris, anything that someone says to you, which is a compliment, or even something which is love, can be felt as praise, but doesn't feel any deeper than that. Because deep down, you're aware that they don't actually love you. They love the character that you're playing. This is one of the reasons that Aubrey put forward. He thinks that film stars have so many challenges with mental health, because these film stars play roles. People don't love Russell Crowe. They love Maximus. People don't, do you know what I mean? They don't love Chris Hemsworth. They love Thor. And you get this meta ego going on where you have layers of it. And it's challenging. The way that I did it was I just tried to really strip back away from the things that I knew that didn't serve me and didn't make me happy and didn't feel like they fulfilled me. People know, You know, if you go out boozing with your mates every weekend and you wake up on a Saturday morning regretting it and feeling like, is this really all that there is to life? Then, you know, okay, that's you. You're highlighting that there's a misalignment between what you're doing and what you want in life, even if you don't know what you want. So just get rid of the stuff that's in the way. A lot of the time, you can see much more clearly if you just shift all of the shit out of your room, and then you're like, right, okay, this room's a tip, but at least it's not covered in rubbish. Now I can go and pick this up. Right, does this serve me anymore? Yes, it does, actually. Cool, I can put it away neatly in a drawer. Right, okay, does this serve me? No, it doesn't. Right, that can go in the bin as well.
Yeah, of course. And, you know, it's funny you say that about when you were breaking away from that mindset, though, because I'm in the content creation game and I work with a lot of, it could be influencers, businesses, brands, personal, you know, this type of thing. And what happens is you get to a point where you're putting out content to please a certain demographic or audience for the numbers, for the likes and all that type of stuff. Now, you get in that scenario where even the content creators are not creating real content or authentic content or genuine. So who are we even seeing? And if you're in the world where when you're just scrolling, and all I'm seeing is Gary's doing this, Bob's doing that, or Tracy's doing that, is that even Bob, Gary, or Tracy? Do you know what I mean? It gets to that point where, you know, are we ever going to kind of live in a world where we can actually get out of that cycle? To, you know, whether it's Instagram removing the likes, or because the impact that's having on people is just getting to the point where now, and I know this sounds mental, but I actually got into fitness over the back of what I'd seen online. So for instance, you know, there can be obviously the benefits and that side of things, but then really, are you actually into fitness, or are you doing it to keep up with the appearances, if you like?
It's a really, really great point, mate. And I think far more people than know it are doing things for externalized measures of success, not internalized measures of success.
Yeah.
And it is a surefire route to misery. To do things purely for the adoration or the acceptance or just the approval of others will make you miserable. That will be the life that you look back on when you're 80 years old and regret, because you won't have done anything that was for you. You'll have done things that you thought were for you, but they were for your mum, or they were for your sister, or they were for the way that your grandparents thought that you should have lived. They were for your religion. They were for your culture. They were for the shithouse friends from the shithouse town where you were born. That's not what life is about. What life is about is discovering what you want, then working out how to get it. What do you want to want? Genuinely, what do you want to want? Not societal norms, not how you deal with past traumas, not paths of least resistance, not your genetic heritage, not the habits that you've had since you were 16 years old. None of that. It's what do you want to want? Live a consciously designed life. And you're very, very right to say that when you watch social media, what people are doing is purely for externalized measures of success. They're only doing it for that reason. For the vast, vast, vast majority of people, touched on Instagram removing the likes counter. I think that's a big part of it. One of the reasons that I think they're doing that is so that we focus more on the quality of the content, as do the creators. So both user and creator view the quality of the content on its own merits, aside from the popularity, right? Because even as a user, I see a post from someone and I see that lots of other people have liked it, and I think, ooh, I should like that as well. It's natural that we want to follow the crowd. Or the converse of that is, that's really popular, I'm going to have a pop at this person because I want to be a contrarian. There are some people that are wired in that way as well. But either way, the number of likes influences the way that you view something. So by taking that away, I think that we're able to see things with more, less distortion.
But because we're in a world where marketing is the only thing we're all involved in, whether you like it or not, are we ever, or will you or I truly ever know what you want? Because even if it is that job for your own, you know, it's for you, it's not for your family, it's not because of heritage, it's not because of anything like that, but the way you get rewarded will influence the things you decide to do as well. So, you know, whether it is, Chris, I mean, you've said there you've went to Bali. I've been to Bali myself, and the only reason I went to Bali was simply because of Instagram and what I saw on you know, all these. I want to go and find myself, work on MacBooks and cool coffee shops, go and do MMA. Don't even do MMA. Do you know what I mean? But that was something when I was there, I thought, why not go and pop into the local gyms and all the rest of it now? You know, so how will we ever, and it, of course, the question's so complex, but do you really think that a person can truly find what they want?
Yes, definitely. I think that life would be very, very hopeless if that wasn't the case. Now, it's going to take more work. There are more barriers in place because the socialized measures of success, the objective metrics by which people say, I have done this much great in the world today, those are more prevalent and easier to see than ever before. If I released a podcast episode today and it's done really well in the first 90 minutes that it's gone up. So that teaches me, that tells me something about what goes on. The goal is to decouple your sense of self-worth from what everybody else is telling you. Does the thing that you're doing, would you do that thing if no one else was around? So for instance, with the podcast, which is where most of my passion goes now, I would do that show if no one listened. 1.8
And I imagine you did at some point.
Well, for years, for 2 years, I did. I did more plays in the last 4 months than I did in the 2 years before that. I did more plays last month than I did in the first 18 months of the show. So the return curve is like a hockey stick, but I'm just doing the same thing. I'm having conversations with people that I'm interested in because that's my passion. If you love swimming, be a swim coach. Does it matter how much you get paid? Do you want to be the best in the world? You can try and be the best in the world. That's awesome. But even if you don't make it to be the best in the world, you're still doing the thing that you care about. Yeah. Now, can you leverage off that? Do we need to probably be realistic here and say it's going to be incredibly hard for you to deprogram all of your desires for social success? Like, no matter what you say, even the people who are ascetic and they renounce all worldly possessions and they're following the minimalist movement, even that is done in a way for status. It's very, very rare for someone to totally decouple their sense of self-worth from status. It's so ingrained into us. Yeah. The dominance hierarchy is something that's a big, big part of human life. But if you're doing the thing that you know you're supposed to do, whatever that may be, being an amazing father, being an amazing daughter, looking after dogs, doing whatever it might be, being a Johnny Wilkinson, coaching England rugby team, like you can be whatever you want to be.
Yeah.
But the point is, if you found the thing that you think is right for you, just continue doing it and try and decouple yourself from that sense of self-worth. But very much so, a lot of people have forgotten the actual center. They've got rid of the core of the apple and all they have is the skin around it. And the skin around it is fame for fame's sake.
If you don't know by now, I run a business called The Content PT. I create content for influencers, PTs, online coaches and fitness brands all around the world. So if you are someone who's in need for sexy content for your social media, or you really want to maintain a competitive edge in your industry, drop me a DM on Instagram. See, and it's funny you mentioned that because I think you've touched on this in a podcast that you've done at some point. I can't remember which one it was, Chris, but a certain experience or something that I've definitely struggled with or had in my life and in my mindset is I've often correlated success in business to having a good day or having a good time. So if things in business aren't doing so well, I often think that things aren't going well generally. Do you have any techniques or strategies how you can sort of overcome that or kind of get out of that mindset?
So that was something that I felt very, very compelled to. It's what I've classed or what a friend classed as a Puritan work ethic. So you can imagine back in the Middle Ages, you had these priests and they would be hoeing the garden in service to God, right? Their suffering was in service to God, and the suffering itself was what they were aiming for, not the work that was being done. Very, very soon, you can actually even decouple your sense of self-worth from the success of the business, and you can go one step further. There's another circle of hell for you to descend into, and that circle of hell is when you no longer actually care about the end result of the business, but just how much you suffered en route to it. So, for instance, I would run a club night. It would be wonderfully successful. We would make the money that we wanted. The numbers would be great. But if it came too easily to me, I would somehow feel this sense of guilt because I had this Puritan work ethic, because I had decoupled success. First, I'd decoupled my sense of self-worth from my sense of self-worth. Then I'd attached the success of the business. Then I'd got rid of the success of the business and put the suffering associated in operating the business. That was where I was at. So there's a very, very deep vortex that everyone can fall into. What I would say is that you have to try and at least put an upper bound on the level of passion that you have for your business, if you allow the success of your business to be some sort of a comment on who you are as a human, then you are really, really lost. Yeah. And that's not for me to say that it's something that is impossible to do. I was there. I'm allowed to say this because I was in the trenches, right? I dug my way back out. But yeah, it's very natural for people to associate, especially if you're an entrepreneur, a solo business owner, or a small, medium-sized entrepreneur, or even, all the way up to CEOs. Our stock price has moved this much today. I'm sure that, the guys that look after Disney and Google and Facebook and Amazon and Tesla, I'm sure that all of them look at the stock market and feel like it's some sort of a reflection, even in small amounts for the most actualized amongst them, feel like it's some sort of reflection on their sense of self-worth. But you have to remember that no matter what happens out there, like, it really, really doesn't impact who you are. There's something in Stoicism called the dichotomy of control, which is that you need to only care about the controllables. You can only do the things that you can do as well as you can, and the chips fall where they may once you've done that. And that very much is the mindset I think that most people who are in this situation at least should start with. There are other places that they could develop into, but remember that do the job as well as you can. Try and foresee any issues or successes where you can, but you're not omnipotent. You can't operate on 5 hours sleep a night for the rest of your life. Like, you have to look after your personal health, your mental health, your friends, your relationships, your finances, food, water, all the rest of it. And wherever is left to fit work into that, I think that's a much more holistic way of going into it. Remember that the success of the business it's very, very decoupled. Think about all of the things that you don't have control over. The market's forces. Like, you could have had the best business in the world start of 2020 and then COVID hits. Is that your fault? Is it your fault that the business, that your brand new coffee shop that you tried to open in March has gone under before it even launched? Is that your fault? No, of course it's not your fault. There's a pandemic running riot outside, and there will be hundreds and hundreds of business owners just in the UK for whom that's happened. They've worked for a very long time. They've saved up money. They've finally got themselves there, and they haven't even been able to launch their business. That's not their fault. That's not a failing on their side. So scale that forward. Your successes in business and your failures in business are not a comment on you as a person.
Absolutely love that. Thanks a lot for that. Because again, that was actually a personal question. That wasn't for the listeners. I was asking that while I've got your time, Chris. Obviously, I know you've got Carnage, you've got the other things going on. You've probably got your fingers in multiple pies, as well as the success on the podcast. And I know that I can imagine, even doing a podcast as small as mine, if you like, it's very time consuming as well as doing everything else. Do you think you can, even when you just start now, do you think for anybody listening now that they can, run multiple businesses at the same time? Or do you think in order to be successful, you've got to completely throw yourself at one thing, and until you get there, then dabble with other things?
It's number two. Like, if you, especially entering into the world of business, you haven't got a clue what you're doing. Just focus on one thing, get really, really good at one thing, establish yourself, niche down hard into running a coffee shop, being a club promoter, being a financial trader, being the best PA you can be, the best receptionist you can be, whatever it might be. You do not have enough mental capacity and enough experience to be able to do that. And the goal isn't, we have to remember as well, life really, really is a very, very long-term game. You want to think, I want to have a dynasty. I want to have like corporation wealth, or sit back and do what I want wealth by the age of 45 or 55 or 65. I don't want retire by 25. Like, that's not the goal. The goal isn't to smash and grab. The goal is to put yourself on a trajectory long term, which is sustainable, which is enjoyable, which allows you to work with good people that you want to continue working with. And why would it matter? In 30 years' time, would you look back at being 25 years old and care about the fact that you tried to launch 4 businesses at once? Would you care about the other 3 businesses, which were inevitably going to fail in any case? Or would you think, right, I'll just learn my skills on this?
Yeah,
like,
of course.
We often, it's a Bill Gates quote where he says, we overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year and underestimate what we can achieve in 10 years. And that very much is the case. It's called hyperbolic discounting. The fact that our view of the future is very, very different to our view of things that are occurring in the immediate, or at least close up. And Yeah, man. Do one thing at a time. Do one thing at a time. Get good at it.
Love it, mate. Love it. You know what I was going to ask you about the personal branding thing, just to touch back on Instagram. I know you've got around 90,000, 100,000 followers. You know, how much of an impact does that actually have on your podcast? Do you get many listeners from you, you know, directly from Instagram, or is that a separate kind of success story in itself?
I think most of it's a separate success story. Like, everyone knows, right? Everyone knows the guy or girl who went on reality TV or once dated someone that was famous or had a one-hit wonder song or whatever. And now when you see them on Instagram, it's just this slow motion third trimester car crash that's going on where they're just desperately clawing at fame or anything that looks like it's going to get clout. And it's uncomfortable to watch. It's compelling, but it's uncomfortable to watch. And yeah, being honest, mate, a big social media following, a moderate social media following, I guess you would say, where I'm at, it doesn't drive a massive amount of traffic. It drives a good bit. But it's very, very quickly, people, it might get you a little bit of a head start, but it's like saying, if you got a really famous rapper to wear your trainers, but the trainers were shit, would other people buy the trainers? Well, maybe the first pair that they bought, they might buy them because they've got some sort of clout and exposure. But as soon as they fall apart after 2 wears, they're not going to buy another pair. And that's quickly going to go around. So it perhaps permits you to get an initial bump in exposure. But very, very quickly, I hope the reason that people come back and listen to me on the show is that they like the guests that I have on and they like the content that I produce. Like, none of that really has anything to do with the platform. And very much now, over the last sort of 2.5 years, I think I've probably had an attrition of maybe 30K. I've probably lost 30K followers over the last 3 years and gained another 30K. So I've churned through a third of my following, at least on Instagram. And that extra 30K now are here because of the podcast. They're here because of the show. So I've dispensed with what were 14-year-olds that watched Love Island, and I've now picked up a bunch of people that are interested in philosophy or productivity or politics or whatever it might be.
Because I think it's interesting because, you know, when we're talking about, you know, the number of following and what you see and the likes and the like counter and all that good stuff, and the blue tick, you know, the blue tick, Chris. So what I've noticed is when I've actually poached people to be on my podcast and all the rest of it, I've actually had agents and all the rest of it contact us and say, look, at the end of the day, how much are you want to pay? And it's been a case of, right, well, your listener base isn't big enough. However, somehow paying that guest would justify the listener base or the you know, not the insignificant listener base in comparison to their socials, if you like. And I don't understand how, you know, money would change that. It's still their time. They're still giving away their time away. And at the end of the day, if you've got a piece of content, the content should stand alone and still be successful. As you said, if you didn't have a listener base, you would still create the content because the content wouldn't change. And I think it's sad to see a world where someone would need paying. It's like if I asked you to pop on the podcast and you said, look, mate, it's going to be 10 grand for an hour. It's a case of, okay, then how do I justify your content to be that price or whatever it was? Mm-hmm. And I just don't understand where, you know, a lot of people get figures like that and why they push them. At the end of the day, if they're good at what they do, they believe in what they do and they're producing great content, then I don't believe that figures and things should even be brought into the equation. I understand people have got to be paid for the time, but at the same time, I also understand that if it's a podcast or if it's a piece of content, why does a certain figure justify a listener base? I've never understood that. And do you ever get problems like that?
So thankfully, I've never encountered someone who wants money. I've certainly been refused, but I get refused on a weekly basis by guests who haven't got the time or say they don't have the time and actually mean I don't want to talk to you or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I can see both sides, mate. Like I think there's probably a bit of pushback needed on the money side. If you presume that someone has 4 hours a month of allocated time for press and they've used up those 4 hours, in order for you to get them to do the 5 hour, they need to feel, wow, this is really going to be worth it. What does that mean? They want something in return. That something can even just be clout or exposure online. Yeah. But if they know that if Joe Rogan comes a call in, everyone's saying yes. Why?
Yeah.
Because they know they're going to reach 10 million people, including the clips.
Yeah.
But if someone that hasn't even, hi mate, I just thought I'd get you for Kobe Bryant, I thought I'd get you for episode 1. Like,
yeah, of course.
It's going to be a little bit more challenging. So, yeah, it's I can see both sides, but for the most part, I think people are very keen to collaborate, much more keen to collaborate than people give them credit for. And it doesn't take much to get that platform moving. So, people that are considering starting a YouTube channel or starting a podcast or doing whatever, you'd be surprised at how receptive the people that you look up to as heroes are at coming on and collaborating with you.
You mentioned that you've been knocked back loads of times, and can you talk to us a little bit about a setback or something that you've had to overcome throughout your career? It doesn't have to be in your podcast journey. Up until this point, is anything that particularly stands out to you and you thought, you've really had to prove yourself, you've had to go at it time and time again to get to where you are?
Yeah, good question. I always feel a little bbit awkward answering this one because really, man, like I've lived a very, very fortunate life so far, at least in terms of career. I've had like myriad of personal failings, but when it comes to business and stuff, it's really been strength to strength. And
brilliant.
I think the main lesson that I've learned from that is implied by the fact that we've not had any failures. So I think that the main weakness me and my business partner have had over the last decade and a half has been that we didn't take enough risks. And that can be viewed by the fact that we haven't had any failures. What you want is to be right on the cusp of the domain of competence or the pace of growth that you can do. This could be with increasing the price, expanding the product offering, recruiting new staff, expanding into new cities, creating new products, whatever it might be. Like, you want to be you don't want to be so much that it's constant failures and constant risk, because we've spoken about before, this self-branding thing. People want to be associated with products that are successful. And if you continue to say, this company's gone into administration, or like this thing's been pulled off the shelves, or whatever it might be, you don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
But similarly, you want to be pushing that tolerance a little bit. So my two pieces of advice for entrepreneurs would be, firstly, you can probably raise the price of whatever your product is a lot sooner than you think. And you can raise it by more than you think as well. It's basic economics. When demand outstrips supply, you put the price up. And I, despite having done 2 degrees in business, a master's in marketing, I forgot that when it came to my own business, because for some reason I didn't think it applied, or I was scared, or I was whatever, which is dumb.
Yeah.
And the other thing is to not be afraid of expanding when the time is good. So if you're on a good run, build and build and build, because you're not going to be on a good run, particularly in club promo and events. It's very, very fickle, very fast moving, and very tide focused. So obviously people are, it's trends, but everything is trends to one degree or another. If everyone's coming into your coffee shop, or if everyone's coming to your tanning salon, or your dog groomery, or your accounting company, or whatever it is, like if you're absolutely nailing it, then expand when you have that. Put the price up and expand fast and take advantage, because that's not always going to be there. And you're going to have to wait for another 5 years or 10 years or 20 years for that cycle to come around again, and for you to be the hot kid on the block. So those are the 2 lessons I think that I can reflect on that I should have learned in business sooner. But again, I don't have a massive problem with a prudent business approach. I think growing slow is a smart way to be. The number one rule in business is to just keep playing the game. You don't want to go broke, and you don't want to go to jail. Those are the 2 things that you don't want to have happen. So if you're going to take risks, make sure that they're not with all of your capital. Make sure that they're not with the law. Other than that, you're probably going to do fine.
How important do you think, Chris, that content is for businesses, brands, influencers, whoever it is? How important do you think it is to keep feeding that machine, keep feeding that and putting that out there, staying active and staying relevant?
I think for an influencer, I think it probably depends on who you are. For an influencer, it's probably important, because that is your lifeblood. Like if you make your money off sponsored posts online, then you need to keep posting online. If you are a sportswear company, you probably need to keep on driving the right influencer collaborations. If you're an accounting firm, a lot of the time I see companies who really don't, their market and their future employees aren't on Instagram. Maybe they need to spend their time going to conferences. Maybe they need to spend their time getting published in peer-reviewed journals, scientific companies, or perhaps like engineering companies, logistics, operations. What are you doing? Like, you do not need a social media manager. Just put someone who's in the admin office on 5 hours or 10 hours a week of just pumping out stuff. Buy a nice DSLR camera, get a mate who understands photography to send you some presets over, and just snap some of the happy people in the office. Black Friday done, 100,000 packages gone out, blah, blah, blah. Brilliant. Fantastic. You're not selling that. Your customers aren't on there. And I think very much the influencer, Instagram, social media culture has convinced everyone that they need to have a big social media presence. That's not true. Some people need to have an incredibly focused social media presence. Yeah. Other people just need to do the bare minimum. And I can't think of many businesses, except for maybe National Defense, where they don't want any sort of social media presence.
Yeah.
But I think the curve, the return curve needs to be people that should be focused on it, being focused on it more and being focused on adding value. I think the days of the very transactional, perfect Instagram influencer lifestyle, Bali life stuff, I think that's really kind of starting to fall away. It looks quite cringy now. When you see people that are with their perfect girlfriend in their perfect car with their Gucci handbag and their Louboutin shoes on and blah, blah, blah. It just feels really sort of 2016. And, I can say that because trends move quickly, and look at what's happening on TikTok. People are doing different things. It's not about being cool so much. It's more about what you can do, not who you are. And I think that that's going to continue. I also think that the growth of the podcasting platform, people like Joe Rogan, Hillary Clinton's got a podcast now. All of these sorts of characters are moving into long form conversations because it's obvious that people desire more than just transactional, there for their sake content.
So when it comes to Instagram specifically, could you give 2 tips on how to grow a following? Again, you've got quite a large or moderate, as you say, following. Could you give any tips on how to grow that for anyone listening now? They've got the first 1,000 followers there, and they're just looking to get a following. They may not even know why they want the following.
Well, first off, ask yourself why you want it, because if it turns out that the reason that you want it is because you think it's going to make you cool, that's I guess it's an acceptable reason for it. But you have a limited amount of time in the day. Would you be better off spent making a YouTube video a week rather than curating a bunch of different Instagram captions? I think for me, I brute forced it. So I was really aggressive before I went on Love Island and got a kick of, maybe 20,000 or 30,000 when I went on there. I was really aggressive. So I'd aggressively follow and unfollow people just to get pure brute force growth, which is not the most ethical tactic, but it works. I think the first thing that everyone who desires to be an influencer, their first goal should be to breach 10K. You need to get the swipe up on stories. You just have to have it. Not being able to direct people to the link, putting a story up and saying new whatever, now live, link in bio, it's another step that no one is going to take, and the loss of conversions isn't worth it. So your first goal, my first goal would be just aggressively follow and unfollow all of the people that follow your competitors or your mates until you hit 10K. Just do that. You can go up by about maybe 100 a day quite safely, and then after you get to 3,000 following, go back down and then go back up. You can literally order your following by date, most recent, and just go through and bip, 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 and around about 100 a day, maybe split into 2 groups of 50 would be a good way to start. Other than that, man, once you get yourself to somewhere, people have to have a reason to follow you. What's the reason that they're following you? Long captions seem to do well. I think that long captions would probably be another one. Get yourself over 10K by being aggressive and continue to use longer captions. They seem to, they develop a couple of things. They'll develop your writing skill, which is useful because you can then use that for creating marketing copy for other things. You can convert it into blog posts. I wrote a long post for World Mental Health Day on Saturday on my Instagram, and then repurposed an extended version of that for my newsletter on Monday, today. So, once you get into the rhythm of doing stuff, you can actually make things happen more and more often. Obviously, getting shares off other people, like if you do something cool, if you go out for food with a friend, especially a friend that's got a big following, tag them on Instagram on the stories. Most people want to repost stuff just because they're desperate for content. So if you tag someone on it, they'll naturally do it. I did it with Ryan Holiday. I do it with Robert Greene. I do it with James Clear. I'll do it with a porn star. Like, I'll do something with them, tag them in the photo or the image, and even Robert Greene, Ryan Holiday, New York Times bestsellers 10 times over, even they repost shit because they need content.
Yeah, that's true. So what techniques would you use then to sort of get better engagement? I understand getting a following, you can go through them systems, them strategies to unfollow and follow and all that type of stuff. However, I've actually experienced things like that in the past with the likes of Twitter and things, and growing me following on Twitter, then dropping it back down. But I realised that engagement was absolutely pants. What kind of things could you say, which would spur on more engagement, more real engagement as well? Because at the end of the day, if you're trying to promote a product or service or business or brand or whatever it may be, you really want that true engagement. You want buyers on there. It's, the number becomes irrelevant at the top of your Instagram if they're not real engaged buyers. Do you have any kind of strategies or anything, or any kind of call to actions or tricks or tips you could give away for someone who's trying to push a product, brand, or service via Instagram?
Yeah, so again, remember, or think about the industry that you're in. If you're in an industry that, if you're an accountant, no one gives a shit about, 31st of March, self-assessments are in, been a tough week, thanks to all our clients. They don't care. They're on LinkedIn or they're with their kids, watching TV. Focus yourself. Create a newsletter once a quarter, which summarizes the changes in SME accounting. That will add a ton of value. Where are the people that you need to reach, and what would add value to their lives? That is not always Instagram. If it is Instagram, so we've now selected for the companies for which it is, you're a local coffee shop, you're a sportswear brand, you're fast fashion, you're doing internet business, like a SaaS online course or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Just think about what your audience would value. Don't post stuff for the sake of posting it. Think about what would add value to their lives. I personally think that you should stay clear of video. I don't think video on Instagram works massively well. If you even look at the best guys in the world, someone like James Smith, if he gets it slightly wrong on video, the engagement and the reach goes through the floor. He can afford to get it more wrong with stills than he can with video. Focus on longer captions. If you do have the swipe up, or if you've got tags and stuff like that on your stories, only have one call to action per story. So if you post this up and you want to tag me in it, you can press and hold and move my name off screen so that all people have to do is swipe up. You don't want to ask them to swipe up, plus have a hashtag in there that people can click on, plus have an @ mention that people can click on, because they're not going to do the swipe up because they're going to have these open loops with other shit.
Of course.
That would be some good ways. Feel free to make good use of hashtags and stuff like that. I think those are the main ones.
Brilliant, mate. Absolutely terrific answer. Last couple of questions for you, Chris. If you could go back to, when you were 19, would you do anything in business differently? I know you've had an absolutely brilliant career and it's went very, very smoothly, as you like, and you've faced no real adversity in that respect. Would you do anything differently? I'm assuming you wouldn't, because it's been so great. But if you could sort of tell a 19-year-old now what business to get into, would you tell them to go down the social media route? Would you tell them to try and create their platform, build up a following via a stint on a reality show? Would you tell them to get, work in corporate? Which way would you say now? So certainly given the current climate and what can actually happen.
Yeah, that's a good question. So in terms of what I would do differently for my career, have less fear around expansion, have less fear around putting the price up. Decouple my sense of self-worth from the business, decouple my sense of self-worth from the suffering associated with operating the business, delegate more quickly. I think that pretty much every small, medium-sized business owner, it's their baby. They're terrified of letting it go. They're terrified of getting a personal assistant in, or a receptionist in, or an operations manager, or a co-director, or a partner, all of this stuff. Like, vet thoroughly, but hire quickly once you find someone that you feel comfortable with. And I'm relearning this lesson with the podcast. So it's getting to the stage now, the advertisers that I have on there dealing with invoices, I'm having to relearn this lesson with a new baby. I need a PA. I need one, or a VA. I need one desperately, but I'm terrified of giving up that control. Again, because it's the same lesson, just in a different industry. So that's what I would do for myself differently. Move faster, break more things, fail a little bit better. If I was someone who was 19, 20 years old now, I would focus on understanding human behavior. So I would read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Atomic Habits by James Clear. Again, the goal right now should be to create a human, you, that has the trajectory that is going to be an animal in a decade or in 2 decades. That's who you want to be. I know it looks cool to see the kids on TikTok who have got millions of followers and are able to monetize anything, but the failure rate on that is so high, and the ancillary benefits of that are so low that it's much, much smarter to go slow. Like, get yourself into a business with a friend. Start operating something. If you want to be an entrepreneur, learn what business is like. Club Promo is a great place to start. Selling stuff from Alibaba, like repurposing stuff, even just running a Depop, running your own Depop for your own clothes, gets you into the rhythm of understanding what it's like to interact with a customer, like all of these sorts of things. So
brilliant.
That would be a way. I would definitely learn copywriting. So I would learn to write, to market. How can I write good copy, like proper good sales copy with cool taglines? You do this for your own Instagram posts. Everyone's looking for a pun to do with whatever their particular post is of the day. So just scale that up a little bit. If you are so inclined, if you're more tech inclined, definitely moving towards coding, because the opportunities for you are just going to be insane. If you have an arty or a design background, I would definitely look at getting into product design, personal branding, graphic design. If you are someone that's a little bit more on the creative side, advertising agencies, copywriting agencies, journalism, all of these things are anti-fragile. They're not going anywhere. Like, those are the industries that are really, really going to get bigger, and they're not going to be swallowed up. No, everyone is always going to need marketing. They're going to need graphic design. They're going to need people who understand young trends. Yeah. The industries that I would avoid getting into would probably be more along the operational and the logistics side. Unless you're very, very good at doing that, you're going to get swallowed up by Amazon's logistics, or British Postal, UK Postal Service, or the American, like USPS, stuff like that. So personally, I think steer clear of that. Corporate jobs, if you like security, if you like the idea of turning up and knowing exactly what your wage is going to be every month, if that's the particular mindset you have, then great. But for me, the goal should be to move away from being paid for your time as quickly as possible. Being paid for your time means that even if you're a doctor, even if you're the best doctor on the planet, the number one doctor on the planet, you still have to turn up to work to get paid.
Exactly.
Almost all of the things that I do now, I don't have to be there to get paid. The only stuff that I do is modeling, and I do that because it's fun, and because the hourly rate is so high that I feel that it pays for the fact that I have to be there. But everything else, I own a bunch of houses. They make money while I'm asleep. I run the podcast. That makes money while I'm asleep. I do the club promo. That makes money when I'm not at the events. Like all of these things, that should be the goal. The goal should be to uncouple your wage from your time spent, because that's what leverage is.
It's a bit like the 4-hour work week, isn't it? It's a very similar type of philosophy in that respect, and kind of go down the automation route and all the rest of it. And that is certainly where things are going. And some people will kind of struggle to trust bringing other people on board. I know I've certainly something I've had to overcome very recently, and kind of work with people in areas that I'm not very good at, and all that type of stuff, Chris. And again, you're another lad who I've learned a lot from recently. I haven't been listening to your podcast for that long. It's been a few months now. But I've learned a lot from yourself, so keep doing what you're doing. 2 more questions. The first one is, what do you consider your best trait? And the last one is, what are you doing this year that your future self will thank you for?
Good questions, Sam. Best trait's my curiosity.
Yeah.
It's a competitive advantage. I think it's one of the most, if not the most powerful personality traits that you can have in the modern era. It makes you very genuine to other people. I'm interested to find out. I might not care about someone else, but at least I'm interested in them. And that works. At least that gets us half of the way there. Yeah. So yeah, curiosity is probably my best personality trait, and also my most useful. Keeps life interesting.
Brilliant.
What am I doing now that my future self would be happy about? I think I'm genuinely creating a world that my mind wants to live in. I'm making very, very slowly dispensing with habits and attachments and belief patterns that no longer serve me and will never ever serve me. And I'm slowly creating the mental space that I'm going to be happy living in for the rest of my life, because so many people are very unhappy in their own heads.
Yeah.
You know, even if you're a twin, even if you were born with an identical twin, your life is yours on your own, right? Like you're born alone, you will die alone. That space between your ears is the only place that you have to reside when there's no one else talking to you. And even when someone else is talking to you, the voice in your head can be so loud that you can sometimes not hear them. So I think spending time really, really working at making your mind a nice place to live, creating habits and routines and aligning the outer world with what the inner world wants, and then aligning the inner world with what your true self wants. Like that is broadly what life is supposed to be spent doing. So yeah, I think hopefully the work I've done over the last 5 years or so will make me at 50 and 60 and 70 and 80 happy.
Absolutely phenomenal, Chris. Thank you for that. That was powerful, that, mate. Thanks a lot for your time, mate. It's really, really appreciated.
Pleasure.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.